This is where real conversations happen. Welcome to Sit Down Sundays on the Final Boss podcast, where the movers, the creators, the ones really making things shake, pull up, sit down and talk different. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories, real journeys, and the mindset behind success. From influencers to entrepreneurs to visionaries turning ideas into empires, we tap in with the people who don't just talk about it, they live it. This ain't just an interview, this is a seat at the table. So lock in, listen close, and learn how bosses move. Sit Down Sundays, only on the Final Boss podcast. New era, same boss.
Welcome.
Nice.
Welcome to the Final Boss podcast. Sitting Down Sundays, right? Sitting Down Sundays, man. This is episode number 260. Man, we are 40 episodes away from the harvest, season 5. Unreal, unbelievable, man. Look, it is an incredible time, and we're going to have an incredible time tonight, man. To each and every single one of you, no matter where you're watching from, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. And as always, man, this is for entertainment purposes only, right? So, look, man, I got a great show for you guys tonight, no matter where you're watching from, man. If you're watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Kick, YouTube, Instagram, StreamYard, LinkedIn, Facebook. I already said Facebook. Oh, it's 2 Facebooks. Yes, the other Facebook, right? LinkedIn, TikTok, right? And StreamYard. And there's another one. What is the other one? Come on, brain. Come on, brain. What is the other one? I said TikTok, right? I said TikTok. I said StreamYard. Anyway, it'll come back to me, right? We're out there, man. We're out there. We're everywhere, man. We're out there and we're everywhere. Yo, what's up? What's going on, Reese? What's going on? Hey, bro, my real name is Apuyo Sinkin. I see you, brother. Thank you for checking in, man. Look, man, y'all came at the right time, on the right channel, on the right night, because it is Sitting Down Sundays, man, and we get it in on Sitting Down Sundays, man. So I'm glad you guys are here, man. Look, we're gonna get into tonight's topic, right? Tonight's topic, this is episode number 260, right? Season 4, arc 4, the construction of the rebirth, right? Hello, Alberta Adventures. Hello. Look, tonight's episode, right? While you were laughing, we were building. While you were laughing, we were building. And before we get into tonight's show, man, look, we're going to get into tonight's brass tacks, man. And tonight's brass tacks comes from none other than yours truly, right? Yours truly. And here it is. The world will keep producing chaos, right? We all know that. The question was never whether you would laugh. The question is whether would you build? Yo, what's up, bro? What's going on, man? Thank you for joining us, man. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, right? So let me ask y'all a question, man. Let me ask y'all a real quick question. Let me get rid of these banners, though, before we get in tonight's episode. Let's get rid of the banners. The banners are out of here, man. The banners are out of here, right? So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you something, man, and I need your undivided attention. So, right? And you know, before we get started, I need y'all to sit with me on this one, right? And not, drop something in the chat, man. Drop a fist emoji in the chat. Not a screenshot, right? But something in the chat, right? And when I say this, man, I need you to hear me, right? I need you to feel it in your chest, man. Now listen, right? Answer this. When was the last time something genuinely stopped you, right? Stopped you, and it just gave you a moment, right? It genuinely stopped you. Not made you pause, not made you stop mid-scroll or doom scrolling, not made you send a reaction emoji, right? I mean, stopped you in your tracks, stopped you cold, made you put the phone down, made you breathe different, right? Made you feel the actual weight of what's just happened in the world without immediately reaching for something funny to say about it, right? Because I've been watching timelines, man. I've been watching comment sections, and I've been watching faces in real rooms when real things get said out loud, right? And what I keep seeing over and over is the same pattern, right? The same pattern. The punchline arrives before the feeling does. The meme drops faster than the meaning can land. Tragedy gets 30 seconds of silence, and then somebody posts a graphic with a caption, and it gets 50,000 likes by morning, right? By morning. A war breaks out, and before the smoke clears, somebody has already made the audio clip that becomes the trending sound on short form video for the next 2 weeks. And we all sitting back laughing at it, right? And this is war, right? A family loses everything, and before they finish grieving, someone on the outside has already packaged their story into content. And I'm not standing here tonight to shame anybody for it, right? I understand why it happens, right? And I'm going to show you why it happens, right? And we, the community, right? We're going to get deep into why it happens tonight. But I need you to hear the real question underneath the behavior that everybody can see. Because there's always a deeper question underneath the surface of the thing. And the real question is not why is everybody laughing? The real question is, what are we not building while we laugh? And that is what this episode is, right? We're in Arc 4, the construction season for the rebirth, and we are about to become something new on purpose, not by accident, right? And the construction phase means we are laying the foundation right, not performing, not reacting, but we're building, man, because we are about that build on this show, man. We are about that build. So tonight, part 1 of the diagnostic, and we're going to walk through the full picture, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and of course, the how, right? Because you cannot build something that stands inside a culture you have not taken the time to understand, right? And then part two comes in. We're going to be talking in part 2 in Arc 5, the declaration, and that is where we plant the flag. But tonight we do the work that makes the flag mean something, right? Yo, I am the Final Boss. This is the Final Boss podcast. You are part of the Final Boss community, Final Boss Nation, Final Boss family. And this is Sitting Down Sundays. We're live at 9 p.m. And it is time to go, baby. Let's go. Smarts, Final Bosses, motivators, warriors. Let's get into it, man. Look, welcome. If you're here and this is your first time here, man, welcome to the show, right? Look, I got you. Good evening. Yes. Good evening, Shikandi. Yes, maybe a cigarette. Hey, yo, that was funny. Who said that? Hey, Emery Tekken 228, man. That was funny, bro. Maybe the world just needs a cigarette, right? But look, and look, man, this is not just about the young people. It's not a young people problem, right? Now let me kill that narrative right away before somebody uses it as an exit ramp before we get into the real conversation, right? This is not a Gen Z thing, man. Everybody's attacking Gen Z. It's not a Gen Z thing, right? Gen Z is not being disrespectful. This is not what this is about. This is not a millennial thing or millennials refusing to mature. It's not that either. And this is not about any generation making a choice that the others would not make. It's not about that, right? This is for every single one of us, for every generation, every demographic, every political tribe, every income bracket, every zip code, doing the exact same thing at the exact same time for different surface reasons by arriving at the same identical behavior. The meme makers are everywhere. The comment section comedians are everybody's a damn comedian, right? Everybody is a damn comedian, man. The people who turn disasters into captions or who turn grief into content, who turn political collapse into a punchline, they post before the dust settles. And they're everywhere. They're our neighbors. They're our co-workers, right? They're everywhere, man. They're our teammates, right? And they're sitting right beside you, or they're in your church, sitting in your pew, right? On a Sunday, and they talking about the pastor. They talking about how bad the chorus sounds, right? They talking about the misdirection of the money plate that's being passed around. Man, they're talking about it, bro. Listen. And then there's sometimes they're in your mirror, right? Let's get to the core. They're in your mirror at 6 a.m. before you even realize what you're doing. The who in this story is not a subculture. And we can observe safely from the outside, right? The who in the culture is the culture itself. And that is exactly what makes this a construction conversation instead of just a critic session, right? When a behavior is this widespread, when it crosses every demographic, every single demographic line that people normally use to distance themselves from uncomfortable truths, that is not by an accident, man. I'm telling you, it's by design. And this is a systemic response. The whole system arrived here together, which means the sovereign cannot look at this from the comfortable distance and say that it's not me, right? You have to be honest with yourself tonight, right? You have to be honest because you've been inside the joke too. At some point, in some form, the question that matters for the construction is not whether you laugh. The question is whether you stay there, whether the laugh became your permanent address or whether you used it to exhale to get back to the work. The who matters because the scope matters, right? You cannot build a response to something you have not accurately measured. That's not fringe, people. That is not a niche. That is full circle, full culture. And the sovereign who understands the full scope of what they're operating inside of is the one who builds something capable of outlasting it. Listen, smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, man. Listen, man, let's get into it. Let's get into it right now. We're going to give this thing a name, right? We're going to call it something different. We're going to call it something other than humor, right? Because humor is ancient. Humor is healthy. Humor has always been a part of how human beings survive pressure, process pain, and connect with each other across impossible circumstances, right? And I'm not indicting or indicating that humor is what this is tonight, right? What I'm naming this thing, I'm naming it something more specific, more structural, right? And more costly than plain humor, right? And the real name for what is happening in the culture right now is comic deflection, right? You heard it first. Comic deflection. And it's happening at scale, right? And there is a hard difference between the two because humor releases pressure so you can get back to the work. Comic deflection replaces the work entirely. When the weight of reality becomes too heavy to carry straight, people instinctively bend to it into a comic situation. They bend it into comedy to make it portable, right? Mass trauma gets compressed into a meme. Political failure becomes a caption. Grief gets a laugh track laid over it. Economic fear becomes a trending audio clip. Personal failure becomes depreciating content that gets rewarded with engagement. And from the outside, this pattern looks like apathy. It looks like people simply just don't care anymore, right? But that reading is wrong. I'm trying to tell you it's wrong. And when you build your strategy on the wrong reading, you build the wrong thing, because people care, right? People care. They do. And many of you care deeply, right? You care deeply. They're just terrified of what it costs to show that care without armor in a world that moves this fast, records everything, and forgives almost nothing. So they protect themselves by getting the joke first. They make the meme before the pain can even catch them in public. They perform indifference because indifference feels safe. The sincerity in an environment that monetizes vulnerability while simultaneously pushing it. Comic deflection is preemptive emotional armor. It is the culture putting on protective gear before it steps into a world that keeps hitting, right? And here is the build cost, because you cannot lay foundation with armor on it, right? The sovereign who stays permanently in the joke never gets to the work. And at some point, you got to mix that money. You got to make that money, honey, right? At some point, the deflection has to stop. The decision has to start. That line between deflection and decision is exactly where the construction bends. And smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, man, look. Don't worry. I'm going to address all of you, man. We're going to get that address on. You already know. This is a community. This is what we do. Some of you are probably asking, man, what is this guy talking about? Final boss, what are you talking about, right? Where is this happening at? What are you... Man, it's happening everywhere. Stop, man. Full stop, right? Full stop. Caution flag on the play. Caution flag on the play. You see the flag. Caution, right? Caution flag. The easy answer is social media, right? And the easy answer is incomplete. Now, let me give you the full map, because builders work from full maps. Social media is the engine. That part is true both times. But the room that engine built extends far beyond any screen. It's in the barbershops. It's at the dinner table. It's at church, right? It's in the locker room. It's in the boardroom, right? It's at the family reunions. It's at the town hall meetings, right? Nobody is taking anything serious, right? Because somebody cracked a joke in the first 5 minutes, and the energy never recovered from that. The algorithm did not create the human instinct toward the humor. That instinct is ancient, pre-civilization ancient, right? What the algorithm did was something far more precise and far more consequential. It identified the instinct, measured its engagement value against every other form of human expression. I don't know, bro. I don't know what you need to do about that, man. That's wild. But thanks for sharing, bro. The community appreciates you, right? Now, it identified those things, man. And it measured its engagement value against every other form of human expression. Then systematically rewarded it above the competitors. Anger performs, outrage performs, humor performs, all three drive, clicks, shares, watch time, man, you name it, return visits over and over. The cycle repeats itself. And then the machine learns to surface the funny thing faster than it surfaces the serious thing, right? And it does it every single time. Not because the funny thing is more true, but because the funny thing is more profitable, right? These engines, man, they're making money off of your laughter, your humor, your pain, right? And over and over and over the years of the reward structure operating at scale, the clickable became the culture default. The room, the algorithm that was built is now the primary room where most people spend the majority of their walking hours forming opinions, processing current events, right? Deciding what is real and calibrating what matters. And in that same room, seriousness is a liability. Seriousness slows the scroll, right? Look, it slows the scroll, man. Look, y'all making jokes right now, and I'm kind of like being serious. It's the seriousness does not get shared at the same time that the velocity of the humor does. Seriousness sits in a corner, nursing a drink, while the funny post laps the room 3 times, right? As I sip on my drink. The sovereign has to understand the architecture of the room, not to live in it permanently, but to build something that can exist outside of it and pull people together and pull people toward that outside perimeter, right? You cannot declare independence from a system you refuse to map. Tonight, people, we're mapping it, man. Smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses. Man, listen. Yo, please, Dan, what's your question? What's your question? Listen, I'm here, right? Talk to me, right? Look, nobody woke up one morning and decided that seriousness was finished. No, that's not how it happened. There was no announcement. There was no single event that you could point to and say that this is the day the culture lost its capacity for weight and that seriousness was done. That's not what happened, because this was an accumulation. This is a thing that happened over a period of time. A slow structural collapse of cultural gravity across decades of compounding events that kept arriving faster than people could process them with their own dignity still attached, right? Now, let me walk you through the arc, because context is context. Give me a second. Context is infrastructure, and infrastructure is what the construction runs on, right? Now we talking, let's go post 2008, man. Let's go post 2008, when trust and financial institutions collapsed for an entire generation of people who watched adults work by the rules lose everything anyway, right? We saw it. You saw it, right? You saw it. And then we watched the people who caused the collapse get rescued with public money, while the people who got hurt got a press release, right? That was the beginning. Hey, please, Dan, put your hand down. Put your hand down. No hallway pass, right? No going to the principal's office. Like, classes in session, man. Take some notes, right? Classes in session. And then, right? Something else happened. We saw that authority lost credibility at the scale, right? Formality loses its culture hold along with it. And the serious face of power became a mass people recognized. And once you see the mass, you stop treating the performance as real. And then political fracture of the mid 2010s, right? When the national convention, the national conversation became an open theater. When every press conference and debate and policy announcement was staged for cameras and optimized for the viral moment rather than the actual issue. The serious face became a costume anyone could put on. And then people responded to the performance with their own performance, right? And then the pandemic hit. So then we went through 2 years of collective trauma, collective isolation, collective uncertainty about everything from health to economics to basic human contact. And the only real social space most people had was that screen that you carry around everywhere you go, right? And that screen was the funny thing that was that made people feel less alone, right? Less alone at 11 o'clock at night in an empty apartment, right? In a silent, quiet neighborhood, right? And by the time the world tried to return to whatever normal thing they were supposed to return to or was supposed to mean, The nervous system had already recalibrated around that survival mechanism. The threshold for what was required when it was time to be serious and have serious engagement had moved on. It kept moving. Every new disaster that arrived and got replaced by the next thing before anyone finished processing the first one. And that raised the threshold a little higher. See, where we are now is not a moment. It is the compounding effect, the compound result of a long erosion. And erosion is exactly what happens when the building stops, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors. Look, let's cook. Let's cook, man. It's time to cook, right? Let's cook. Now let's talk about the why. Let's talk about the why, right? Let's talk about the why and let's talk about layer one of the why, right? And this one requires intellectual honesty, right? And you have to be honest with yourself because the temptation here is to make this a character indictment, and it isn't. Layer one is psychological, and it is rooted in how human beings are actually built. Humor is a genuine thing. It's documented. It's clinically recognized as a coping mechanism, right? When reality becomes overwhelming, laughter releases the pressure valve, the pressure in the nervous system, right? It's not weakness. It is not avoidance, right? In the clinical sense, right? But it is the brain doing exactly what it's designed to do when the external environment exceeds the system's capacity to process pain in real time. The problem is never the mechanism itself. The problem is when the mechanism becomes the only tool in the box, right? Do you hear me? Right? A pressure valve is essential infrastructure in any system that builds up pressure, but a pressure valve is not a foundation. It is a load-bearing wall. It is not the structure. It is the release. When a culture starts using a release mechanism as a substitute for the structure, you get what we're seeing right now. And people are not broken, man. Their behavior makes complete biological sense given the volume and velocity of difficulty this generation has absorbed in a compressed period of time. We're talking about wars on top of wars. We're talking about economic collapse, pandemics, political dysfunction, climate instability, identity fragmentation, information overload at a scale no previous human civilization had ever had to process. The brain is doing the math, and the math keeps coming back overwhelmed, and the math ain't mathing. You hear me? The math ain't mathing, right? And right now, this is when the laugh arrives. Right? It is the brain saying, I cannot carry this straight face anymore, or even right now. So let me go make it lighter. Right? Let me go make it lighter so I can survive until tomorrow. Let me go laugh at something, right? How many of you sit back and after a long, hard day pause, a day of craziness, you say, let me go sit back and laugh, right? You sip on your drink, you smoke whatever you're smoking, and you take a laugh and you take a load off, right? That's the sovereign, man. The sovereign does not shame the response. It's okay. The sovereign understands it. It honors it for what it is. And then I have to ask this next question, because the next question being is this. The pressure was released, right? Now, what are you going to do? Now, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? What are you building, right? Because the pressure valve kept you alive. The pressure valve kept you stable. The pressure valve lets you laugh it off and wake up the next morning in a better mood, right? But what you build is what defines you. So what are you building, right? This is layer one, the verdict, man. I need you to start building, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors. I need you to start building, man. Now let's get into layer two. Let's get into layer two, man, because layer two of the why is a little bit less comfortable than layer one, right? Because layer one gives people grace, right? It gives people grace. It gives people patience. But listen, man, layer two asks them to look at something even harder, right? Because layer two is about power, specifically about the feeling of having none, right? You heard me. It's about power and not having any power. Because right now you're powerless, right? And here's the mechanism, right? When people feel like they have zero real agency over the outcomes that shape their lives, humor becomes a form of surrogate power, a substitute for the real thing. You cannot stop the war, but you can write the caption that gets 100,000 shares. You cannot fix the broken system, but you can make the meme that makes the broken system look stupid and feel small at the same time. And that small victory is a victory for everyone and everyone agreeing with you, right? You cannot change the vote. You can't reverse the policy. You can't move the markets. You can't stop the disaster, but you can be the funniest person in the room. When the disaster is the subject, right? You could be the Drewski on time, right? You could be the Drewski on the timeline, man. I'm trying to tell you. And in the absence of real power, the feeling of being the funniest person in the room becomes addictive, right? It becomes a substitute for the harder, slower, less immediate, rewarding work of actually building something with real influence. This is the cost that does not show up on the surface. It is the invisible, right? Until you measure the output, right? And how much energy went into that joke? How much went into the build? And when you run the audit, honestly, for most people in the current cultural moment, the ratio is inverted. The joke got the prime hours, the prime creativity, the prime social energy. The build got whatever was left at the end of the day after scrolling, right? And the sovereign has to recognize that this pattern inside themselves before they can build past it, not as self condemnation, right? Not as self condemnation. Now, as honest accounting, right? Come on, Mike. What is going on, bro? What are you doing? Chill out, right? The sovereign has to recognize it, man. Right? As an honest accounting. Because you cannot allocate resources you have not counted. The construction demands the count. Where did your power go today? Ask yourself that question, right? Into the caption or into the foundation. That's the layer two verdict, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors. That is the layer two verdict, right? Now, let's talk about layer three, man. Let's get into it. Layer three. Layer three is the deepest one and it's the quietest one, right? This is the desensitization. This is the desensitization by volume, right? And it is the layer that most people never examine because it requires admitting something about yourself that feels uncomfortable to say out loud. We have seen too much, too fast, for too long, right? The human nervous system was built to process experience at a certain pace, a pace that matched the physical world humans evolved inside of. The pace of a village, a community, a season, a generation. Information travel at the speed of a person walking or a horse running, right? Consequence had time to land before the next thing arrived. The pace is gone. In its place, we have a system that delivers the full weight of global events into a personal device at any hour of the day or night. Famine, comedy, war, products, ads, a family buried in rubble. And 3 seconds later, we got a dance challenge, right? The speed and juxtaposition together create a specific kind of damage. The threshold for what registers as serious keeps rising because the volume of serious things keep increasing without any corresponding increase in the human system's processing capacity, right? What would have stopped a previous generation code? What would have required weeks of communal processing? What would have been the defining event of a year now gets 48 hours of coverage and then it's replaced. Every time the replacement arrives before the processing is even complete, the threshold rises a little more. Humor fills the gap. Humor fills the gap, right? Where my Drewski fans at, right? Where about that dude's a fool, right? And Drewski funny as hell, man. He might be the funniest person alive right now, right? Everybody's loving Drewski. But where is the genuine shock and awe? Where is the genuine grief that used to be here, right? When was the last time you felt genuine shock and genuine grief? Not because people are cold, but because the system is overwhelmed and the numbness is not, or I should say, the numbness is what overwhelmed the systems when they have nothing else to produce or no other option. The servant's task in the construction is not to feel more by force of will. It is to build structures that slow the pace deliberately. Communities, practices, disciplines, architecture that protects the capacity for weight. That is what we're building. Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, man. That was layer 3. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into it, right? Now, let's talk about the mechanism, right? Let's talk about the mechanism. Right? Let's talk about the how, right? HOW, the how. Let's talk about it, right? And this is where the construction lens becomes the sharpest, because understanding the how is what separates the builder from the consumer. And here's how this happened at the system level. Social media platforms are built on engagement metrics: clicks, shares, likes, comments, watch time, return visits. These are the numbers the platforms optimize because these are the numbers that generate advertising and revenue. Early on in the life of these platforms, researchers and engineers discovered something that should have been obvious, but was not widely discussed publicly. And it wasn't discussed for years. It was humor drives engagement faster and more reliably than almost any other form of human expression. A funny post travels farther, faster, and gets shared by more people across more demographic lines than a serious post on the same topic almost every single time. So the algorithm learned, not metaphorically, but literally. The machine learning systems that govern what content surfaces and what content gets buried is what they're trained on. It's the engagement data, right? And that data consistently showed that the funny version of the story outperformed the serious version. So the algorithm began surfacing the funny versions first, right? Rewarding the creators of funny content with reach and visibility. The creators, who are almost human beings with mortgages and aspirations and desire to be heard, learned the lesson the platform was teaching. You want reach? You got to be funny, right? You got to shuck and jive. Right? Shuck and jive, right? You want to be buried? Do what I'm doing, right? Do what I'm doing. You want to be buried? This is what happens, right? You go earnest. You go platform teaching, right? That's what you do. And over the years, I'm at episode 260 right now, right? Over the years, that feedback loop is operating at full scale. The culture outside the screen began reflecting the culture inside it. The barbershop started talking like the comment section. The dinner table started sounding like a podcast that was performing for an audience. The loop became self-sustaining, right? The machine trained the culture, and the culture trained the next generation inside the machine. The sovereign who understands this is not a victim of it. They are a strategist operating with a full intelligence picture, and the strategists build differently than the consumers do. Man, listen, hear me out, man. Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, hear me out. Look, I understand my content is what it is. My content is of serious nature. Serious nature, man. It's for the thinkers. It's for the community, the smarts, motivators, warriors, and final bosses. I get it, but I'm not changing. I'm not going to start shucking and jiving and doing jokes and being. And I'm a funny. Listen, I'm a funny motherfucker. Let me tell you. I grew up in DC. We are master joners by design. right? This is what we do. But my content is of serious nature. There's so many people out there who are in that lane of comedy, right? We need a lane of seriousness. We need a lane that can present information, right, to the people and to the masses. That's why we're here, right? And that's why we're building. And that's why this is the construction, right? Now, everything I brought up to this point is part of a map, right? Now, let's talk about that map because we mentioned it earlier, right? Because maps are not destination. Maps are tools that we use to reach the destination. And the destination in R4 is not understanding. Understanding is just the prerequisite. The destination is construction. And here's the pivot question for tonight, right? Because I want you guys to sit with this. Now, I want you to sit with this and I want you to answer this question. If you accept everything we have laid out across the first parts of the show, if you accept that the whole culture inside of a pattern of comic deflection, you heard it here first, all right? I coined it. That the algorithm incentivized it, that the nervous system normalized it, that the powerlessness made it feel like the only available option, then what does the sovereign actually do with that information? All right? Drop it in the chat, man. Drop your answers in the chat. The wrong answer is to become serious about being serious. Look, that is just performing the opposite of the problem. The sovereign who decides that their brand is now no nonsense and grim has not escaped the performance loop. They've just switched costumes, right? The right answer is to build something that has real weight without demanding that other people carry it before they are ready. That is the architecture of the construction. You don't get to shame the culture for what it is, right? You build something so substantively real, so undeniably grounded, so structurally sound that people who are ready to step out of the joke and into something that actually holds weight have somewhere to step to. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where you are. Each and every last single one of you, that's where you are. You're at that place. Because this is the Final Boss community. And this is what the network is built for. And this is what happens. And this is what it has to be. We're not the loudest in the room. The most real in the room. The room where the work actually happens. Not the room where everybody performs for each other and calls it growth. The room where you put things down, you pick up tools, and you build something that did not exist before you walked in. That is what tonight's about. Tonight is about the construction, and construction demands this work, and the work starts right now. It starts right now. It starts right now, right? Not after the next disaster, right? Not when the conditions are better, right? Because I guarantee you, yeah, they signed a treaty, supposedly, right? They signed a treaty. By Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll be attacking again. The loop is happening. People are making money off the ups and downs of what's happening on the market right now. No war, market drops. Yes, war, market rises. Look, man, start paying attention to these things, man. It's time to get serious, right? Now, smart final bosses, warriors, motivators, man, pay attention, right? Because this is a cost. The cost confession. Cost confession is coming up, right? And it's a real cost. And there's a name and number attached to it, right? And I'm going to give you something personal right here because that's what we do. We deal in theory we don't deal in theory without skin in the game, man. There's always a season in my life. There's a season in your life, right? And I'm not going to give you the exact date, but I will give you a shape of it, right? Where I was producing content at volume, staying visible, staying active, keeping the energy up in public, man, doing it partly because the performance of being okay was easier than admitting what the real cost was of the transition, right? The transition that I was going through, the transition of what I was doing and what it was doing to me internally, right? Yeah, I was funny in the beginning, right? It had sharp delivery. Man, go look at the early episodes, man. Go to our website at thefinalbosspodcast.com, man. You'll see, right? And I was behind on the actual build, right? And I had to come to a decision, because that creative energy that I was doing, like most, there's no manuscript, right? I was talking about business development, something I've been doing my entire life, right? And then something happened, and I changed the format early on. I changed the format. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the funny. I don't want to do the funny thing. And now here we are doing doctoral frameworks, right? And going into some of the most engaging version of myself for this audience, right? And that's what we're doing. And I won't give you an exact figure, but I would tell you that it was north of what a lot of people were doing on some of their social media, right? The numbers, like the money was the numbers were real. Look, the performance cost, right? And the time of that stage, of that build, is the one resource that we can't get back to. It's gone. It's out of here. It's done, right? It's out of here, right? And I'm not telling you that being funny or performing how you decide to do your social media. I'm not saying that you got to be vulnerable, right, to do it. A lot of people do vulnerability. That's a thing that people do, right? I'm telling you this because the construction has a real cost when you avoid it. That's what I'm talking about. And the real return when you commit to it. The confession is not the point. The correction is the point. And I made a course correction. And the correction started the day I stopped performing, and I was okay with it, right? And I started building, and I've been building ever since. That is the confession, right? I am the Final Boss, and this is the Final Boss podcast, man. And this is what we do, man. Look, man, this is what we do, right? And this is what we're supposed to be producing, what we're producing right now, right? Now let's talk about an uncomfortable verdict. Let's talk about an uncomfortable verdict. Because there's one hard, undeniable statement, right? There's no softening, there's no footnote, but it's uncomfortable, right? And here it is. Listen, man, I love comedy. I love my comedians, right? I mean, hey, put the fist emoji up if you love comedy, man. Put your fist emoji up if you love comedy, right? Listen, comedy is not the enemy. Cheap comedy as a permanent substitute for accountability is. I'm gonna say that again. Cheap comedy as a performance substitute for accountability is. That's the enemy. And there's nothing wrong with laughing. Everybody loves laughter. I love to laugh, right? My mom called me a fool. I love to laugh, right? I had her cracking up earlier, right? And there's everything wrong with using laughter to let the powerful off the hook while the people keep scrolling and calling it awareness. All right. People make jokes about Jeffrey. People are making jokes about everything. It's insane what we turn into comedy. People dying, wars. I've mentioned all this stuff earlier, man. And here's where the part that makes the verdict uncomfortable, the things that I'm talking about. Because most of the content that people are sharing right now as social commentary, as resistance, as speaking truth to power, is actually doing the opposite of what it claims to do. The meme does not disrupt power. The meme makes power comfortable. Because while the people are sharing the meme, nobody is building the alternative. Nobody is constructing the thing that would actually replace the broken system or compete with corrupt institution, or provide a genuine option for the people that the joke is supposedly defending. The joke is not neutral. When the joke is the primary product of a culture or the culture's creative energy, the joke is a pacifier. It manages frustration without resolving it. It creates the feeling of action without the outcome of action. It lets people go to bed feeling like they participated in something when what they actually did was generate engagement for a platform that profited from their outrage. That is the uncomfortable verdict. The joke is not harmless because at scale, the joke is the most effective tool power has ever had for neutralizing opposition without firing a shot. You want to change something? You want to build something? That's it. That's the whole verdict. Smarts, final bosses, warriors, motivators. Listen, man. That's the verdict, right? So you're probably asking, so what does the sovereign actually do differently? And you're probably, and I'm going to tell you, but not in theory. I'm going to tell you in practice, right? And I'm going to tell you right now. Because inside this arc, talking about tonight, here are 3 moves that separate the builder from the consumer in a culture of comic deflection. And here is the first one. The sovereign develops what I am calling the reckoning reflex. The automatic internal pause before the joke, not suppressing the humor, not performing seriousness, just the discipline of asking one question before the caption gets typed. What is the real thing happening here, and have I actually looked at it? That 1 second of internal pause is the difference between comic deflection and conscious processing. It does not take the humor away. It makes the humor something you choose instead of something that happens to you. And then move number 2. The sovereign tracks their build against the performance of time. If the hours spent on content, commentary, and social engagement consistently outnumber the hours spent on the actual work of construction, the ratio is the real verdict of what the season or what season you are actually in, regardless of what season you say you're in. The builder measures the output, not the output of content, right? Not about the output of content, about the build, but the output of the build itself. And then there's move 3. The sovereign creates containers for weight. And you're probably asking me, what do I mean by that, right? What I mean by that is deliberate spaces, practices, and communities say the real thing, hear the real thing back, and be in the presence of people who are also building something real. That is what this network exists to be. Not the space where everything is heavy and joyless. The space where weight is not punished and the work is the point. Those 3 moves together are the beginning of the sovereign construction response to a culture that has decided nothing is serious anymore, right? Smarts, motivators, final bosses, warriors, hear me, right? Hear me. Listen, we laid the foundation, right? Now watch what gets built, right? We're about to close. We got 7 more minutes, man. And if you're still here, let's build, right? Because inside of construction, Arc 4, Season 4, the Rebirth, this is where everything we did and talked about tonight becomes foundation work, right? And it's not glamorous. It's foundation or construction is never glamorous, man. But the part that, and it's not the part that anybody take pictures of. Nobody wants to take a picture of a foundation. Nobody posts a photo of the rebar going into the concrete. Nobody makes a thumbnail of the foundation being poured in the rain. But nothing that stands gets built without it. And tonight, we mapped the culture. We named the behavior. We gave it a real name. We walked through the who, the what, the when, the why, the when, and we gave it 3 layers. And then we talked about the how. And we gave you the cost confession with real numbers. We gave you the uncomfortable verdict without a landing. And we gave you the 3 practical moves that separate the sovereign builder from the sovereign spectator. And that, my friends, is a full night of foundation work in an hour, right? And the foundation is the construction, and that's what the construction runs on. But I need you to know that uh tonight's not the full answer, because this was just part one, right? Part one is the diagnostic. Part one is the understanding of the culture you're operating inside of, with enough precision and enough honesty to build something that stands apart from it and above it. Part two, dun, 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 dun. Where my drum roll at? Let me get some drums. Where my drums at? I got drums. I think I got drums. Where my drums at? Got drums. Part two comes in Arc 5, the declaration. And the declaration is exactly what it sounds like. This is the episode where we stop diagnosing and we plant the flag, right? We already threw the yellow caution flag. And that is where the sovereign does not just understand why the world is laughing. That is where the sovereign announces what they built while the world was distracted. The open loop stays open on purpose, because what I'm about to tell you in part two is something that only makes sense after you've done the work that we did tonight. And if you've been with me this entire hour, you've done the work, right? Part two is yours. You need to show up for it, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, listen. I know I got a bomb somewhere. Where's the bomb at? Dropping bombs on you. Biatch. Right? See, I can have fun, man. Look, as we close, right? I want to give you something. I want to give it to you clean, right? Because clean closes are what serious people deserve after a serious hour of work. The world is not going to stop producing chaos. That is not the future we're building toward. The chaos is the condition we're building inside of. The question was never whether you would laugh. Of course you're going to laugh. We all laugh. It's human. All right. The question was never whether the weight of this moment would sometimes be too much to even carry. Of course it is. Right. And you're in one of the most compressed and complicated periods any generation has ever had to navigate in real time without a map. But we got GPS, right? The question, and the only question that matters inside of the construction, is what you're building while the rest of the world is busy making content about the collapse. That's the question I'm leaving you. And that's the question I'm leaving you tonight. And I'm leaving it to you, not as a burden, but as an invitation. Because builders do not wait for ideal conditions. Builders assess the terrain, lay the foundation, and whether weather is present, and put one course of brick on top of the last one every single time, every single day, until something stands that was not standing before. This is the final boss way. That is what smart means. Sharp enough to see what is really coming. That is what final boss means. Committed enough to build through it anyway. That is what motivators mean. Fueled by something bigger than the moment. And that is what warrior means. Disciplined enough to do the work when the work is hard and nobody is watching. And the joke would have even been easier. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Final Boss Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. I am the Final Boss. This has been Sitting Down Sundays, episode number 260, Arc for the Construction, season 4, the Rebirth. We're here each and every last Sunday at 9 o'clock live. Part 2 is coming. Be ready for it. And as always, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret. And if I don't see you again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. Man. Make sure you go like, share, and subscribe. And don't gatekeep, man. Give it to at least 3 people who needs to hear this information, right? Give it to 3 people. And look, I am here. We are here. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show for tonight, man. Thank you for joining me. Have a great night. Oh, I see you tomorrow. Tomorrow at 9 p.m. live for Motivation Monday. Let's get it.